mga ka-joyful, this is Pastor Ivan of Lifehouse Church once again at welcome po sa ating Session 3 ng ating Christian Joy 101. Kagaya po ng sinabi ko last time, before we learn what Christian Joy is, we will answer muna some important preliminary questions. And our question po last time was, why is God a happy God? Well, we have learned po sa episode 1 that God is indeed happy or joyful. The Bible describes God in 1 Timothy chapter 1 verse 11 and chapter 6 verse 15 as blessed, which literally means po happy. Happy. We can also see God's happiness in Proverbs chapter 8 verse 30 and 31. We also said in Psalm chapter 16 verse 11 and Hebrews chapter 1 verse 9 that God is not just happy, but He is in fact the happiest being there is. And why is He the happiest? Here's the first reason. We have learned this po in our last session. God is the Trinitarian God. In other words, He exists as a Trinity. Here's the second reason why He is the happiest. The Bible tells us that God is the sovereign and all-knowing God. Now, Pastor, teka, medyo nosebleed ako dun ulit ha. Ano bang ibig mo sabihin pag sinabi mong God is sovereign? Now, to be sovereign over all simply means that God, the one true God, has absolute authority and control over all things. Every person, every event, every situation, every calamity and tragedy, as in everything. Okay? On the other hand naman po, to be all-knowing basically means that God knows all things. Every situation, an event, past, present, and future events, every person, every calamity and tragedy, as in everything din. Yun ang ibig sabihin ng God is all-knowing. Now, the reason why I mentioned God being sovereign alongside the fact that He is all-knowing is because we can see this connection clearly in Isaiah chapter 46 verse 10. Now, para mas maintindihan po natin, let's read chapter 46 ng Isaiah verses 8 to 11, and I'll be reading from the ESV. Remember this and stand firm. Recall it to mind, you transgressors. Remember the former things of old, for I am God, and there is no other. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, that is the beginning of time, and from ancient times, things not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose. Calling a bird of prey from the east, the man of my counsel from a far country. I have spoken, and I will bring it to pass. I have purposed, and I will do it. Now the phrase in verse 10 po, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times things not yet done, that phrase po speaks of God's knowledge of all things. The reason why He can predict future events from ancient times is because He knows exactly all events in history, past, present, and future events. In verse 11 naman po, God mentioned that He will summon a bird of prey from the east. Now this, when we look at the context of this passage, chapter 44 verse 28 hanggang chapter 45 verse 1, refers to King Cyrus. One Bible teacher said that God predicted the sure coming of this king 200 years before his time. Wow, that's amazing, hindi po ba? Now, why is God able to predict exactly this event? Bakit po? It is because God knows everything. In other words, He is all-knowing. And why does God know for sure what will happen in the future? We can see the answer in verses 10 to 11. Let me read po again from the ESV. My counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose. I have spoken, and I will bring it to pass. I have purposed, and I will do it. In other words, the reason why God is all-knowing is because God is absolutely sovereign in accomplishing all His plans and purposes. What He wants from all eternity to happen in history, He has the power and authority to actually make it happen. And so, God knows all things, which are actually the things or events which He planned to surely fulfill in history. But here's an interesting thought po. For God to be able to certainly make these plans and purposes to happen, okay, this requires that He also has sovereign authority over all things. Let me repeat that. Ano po? For God to be able to certainly make these plans and purposes to happen requires that He also has sovereign authority over all things as well. Let me explain po kung anong ibig kong sabihin. Every event, occurrence that happens in our world in history is a result of, influenced by, or affected by other factors and events as well. So in a sense, everything is interconnected. Okay? Interconnected po. Does this make sense? Therefore, for someone to absolutely control an event to come to pass for sure, he has to control also, in the same way, all other events or factors that are connected to it. Let me give you an example po. Let's say the eldership of Lifehouse Church plan to have a church outing 6 months from now. Okay, church? We'll be having this church outing 6 months from now. Mark our words. Matutuloy talaga ito. This will surely happen. Well, for this to happen for sure, as in 100% talaga, we should be able to have authority or control over several events or factors. Unang-una, weather. Kailangan, we can control, we can make sure that it will not rain during that time. Kasi pag umulan, wala po talagang outing na mangyayari. Tama po ba? Number 2, natural disaster. Okay, dapat sure kami, kaya naming siguraduhin that no super typhoon nor earthquake will happen during that time. Thirdly, national government decision. Okay? We must make sure that the government will allow this and not prohibit such activities. Pero for that to happen, we should be able to prevent the spread of COVID until the day of the outing. Next, physical health and well-being. Kailangan we can be able to make sure that no one get physically injured or would acquire COVID. Pero for this to happen, we must be able to control all the people whom our church members will be in contact with. And in turn, other people also whom these people will be in contact with. And also other persons whom these people will be in contact with, and so forth and so on. Next, church finances. Dapat we would be able to make sure na walang urgent needs that will come up that would require our church to spend our budget on. And then, thoughts and feelings. Dapat we'll be able to make sure that none of the members ang magbabago ang isip nila at ang mood nila, okay, kaya naman magbaback out sila. Dapat we will be able to make sure that none of that will happen. Pero for that to happen, we must be able to control everything that they see, everything that they watch, everything that they hear and read. Now, obviously, none of these are within our sure knowledge and control. This is the reason why no one can absolutely be sure of any of our plans. Since we cannot control all the interconnected factors or events surrounding our plans. This is the reason why, when we make our plans, we always say, if the Lord wills, since He alone is sovereign over all things. This is the truth implied po in Isaiah chapter 46 verses 8 to 11. The fact that God can surely predict events in the future means that He is absolutely sovereign over all His plans and purposes. And this implies that God is also absolutely sovereign over all things, as in all things talaga. Now, how wide is the scope of God's sovereignty? How vast is His authority over all? We can see this truth taught in other verses in the Bible. Unang-una, He is sovereign over the most random event in this world. You can see that po in Proverbs chapter 16 verse 33. Secondly, He is sovereign over the biggest creatures in this world. You can see that in Jonah chapter 4 verse 7. Implied po yung truth na yun sa verse na ito. He is also sovereign over nature, and we can clearly see this in Matthew chapter 8 verse 27. And also He is sovereign over calamity. Lamentations chapter 3 verse 37 to 38. He is sovereign over the heavenly bodies. Isaiah 40 verse 26. He is sovereign over our hearts. That's Proverbs chapter 21 verse 1. And He is sovereign in heaven and on earth. Daniel chapter 4 verse 35. All the peoples of the earth are nothing compared to Him. He does as He pleases among the angels of heaven and among the people of the earth. No one can stop Him or say to Him, "What do you mean by doing these things?" Let me read another verse po. Ephesians chapter 1 verse 11. Ang sabi po rito, "In Him we have obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the purpose of Him who works all things according to the counsel of His will." God works all things according to His will. Now, from all these things we can say that indeed God is absolutely sovereign over all things. From molecules to muscles, from worms to whales, from 1,000 gray hairs to billions of galaxies, they are all under God's power and authority. Now, since God is sovereign over all, this then means that all of His eternal plans in history and for humanity will be fulfilled. And since His absolute sovereignty is also connected with His being all-knowing, then we can confidently say that our God knows all things, past, present, and future events, which He Himself has preordained or predetermined. So, as far as His eternal purposes are concerned, everything that He has predetermined or preordained to happen, God never feels worried, afraid, nor frustrated by this. Hindi po siya gaya natin, gaya natin mga tao, who plans a lot and then gets worried whether we can actually accomplish them or not. And we also become frustrated a lot kasi there are many factors, things, people, and situations that are beyond our knowledge and beyond our control, no matter how much we try. Which is why, many times as well, we as human beings are not happy. On the other hand, God naman, since He is sovereign and all-knowing, He is therefore always happy. Did we get that? So in our session, we've learned two reasons why God is always happy. Number one, He is the Trinitarian God. Secondly, He is the sovereign and the all-knowing God. Next week naman po, we'll learn the last reason kung bakit po siya always happy. Kaya sana po samahan niyo po ako ulit sa ating panibagong session ng ating Christian Joy 101. God bless everyone.